Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing dumpers don't want dumpees to know this. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast, and today we are discussing dumpers don't want dumpees to know this. So if you've been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you might be surprised to know that there are certain secrets your ex is likely keeping from you. In today's podcast, I'll be discussing 3 secrets that dumpers don't want their dumpees to know. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is some jump before they are pushed. So if you've been dumped, you're likely thinking that your ex-dumper has it all together. They have a plan, they have a powerful one, they've made a choice that they wanted to make, and you had no say in the matter. But what you might be surprised to know is that one of the biggest secrets but lots of dumpers keep from their dumpees is that the main reason they pulled the plug on the relationship, the main reason why they decided to end things when they did, is because in the back of their mind, they felt that if they didn't, then you would dump them very soon instead. Now, although this can't be guaranteed to be every single dumper, this is just some dumpers, it's certainly a big enough secret, but I think it's important that I spill the beans on in today's podcast, because as a dumpee, you automatically feel lower value. As a dumpee, you automatically feel like you've been rejected. So it could be somewhat of a surprise to you to find out that your ex-dumper may fall into the category of dumpers who actually ended your relationship because they felt if they didn't, you were probably going to do it very, very soon. Often the difference between dumper and dumpee is much finer than you might imagine. It's a very fine line between when somebody ends a relationship and when the relationship was to continue, and actually they are the one who is dumped. Things can be very, very close. And even though right now you are feeling rejection, even though right now you are feeling unloved, it doesn't mean that your ex-dumper is feeling overly confident about all of this. It doesn't mean that your ex-dumper is feeling that they've made the right choice. Sometimes, as I said, the dumper is actually thinking to themselves, I had to do this because if I didn't, I was going to get dumped. And my self-esteem would be shattered, my confidence would be lowered. If I make this decision now, I look like I come out on top. If I make this decision now, I look like I'm in control. I look like I'm a powerful one. Now, although not all dumpers who make this choice for this reason are actively thinking of it in the depth I've just described, this is what's going to be going off in their subconscious if they fall into this category. If they decided to end the relationship somewhat due to the fact that they was worried they were about to get dumped, then you must consider that their confidence is not going to be sky high. If anything, it's going to be very, very low, and this can be a big surprise to dumpees. Now, even if this didn't actively go through your ex's mind, it does showcase that many dumpers indeed are not as confident as you might be expecting them to be. As I said, you have been dumped, your self-esteem is low, you're feeling rejection, you're feeling low value. This means that automatically you put your ex on a pedestal. You're not thinking them as unconfident. You're thinking of them as making a choice that they must have been confident and believing in. You're thinking that you may have begged and pleaded, they didn't change their mind, so therefore they must be believing that they are the powerful one, and you not so much. You know, the reality of the situation is, they were feeling vulnerable in their position. They were feeling that things weren't going quite right, and they were really concerned that you was about to dump them. So they felt, well, if I end the relationship first, it looks as though that I've got my life together. It looks like I can move forward in a way where I've made such a decision that maybe I would be deemed more attractive to other people. Now, although this might seem a fairly messed up way of thinking, there is some logic to this concept, because unfortunately for you as a dumpee, you will know what it feels like to be the one being dumped. Whereas if you end the relationship, you do come out of it with more confidence, or at least you feel that your head is being held higher to the outside world, because you have made a decision. If you're the one who makes the decision, this feels like that you're in control of your scenario and your situation. losing control, feeling that you don't have control over your situation can be very concerning and worrying to many people. And that is why, by doing it in this way, they feel that they can come out the other side on top, not because they wanted to end things, not because they didn't like you, not because they didn't want this relationship to last forever, but because in their own mind they felt you were definitely going to end it soon, and therefore if you're going to end it, they may as well do it instead before you can be the one to pull the plug on the relationship that actually they didn't even really want to end. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast. Please like this video if you're watching on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. And point number 2 is that their life isn't incredible. So again, following on from the perspective of a dumpee that you're now feeling, you're going to be likely assuming that your ex-dumper is living their best life. Now this might be just a thought you have in your head, or it might be based on things you were told. It might be based on things that you see online, in particular social media. Now let's try and break this down as for why this might actually not be the case, and why instead it's one of the big secrets that I need to break to you today, that your ex-dumper's life isn't incredible. So first of all, I suggested that you might just be thinking this. Maybe you've not heard anything about your ex, you've not seen anything, you've not been told anything, but instead you're just assuming their life must be incredible. You're probably thinking it's because they dumped you. Well, I've already said in point number 1 that this might not be exactly as it seems, but whether point number 1 actually plays into your situation or not, your ex-dumper's life is not likely to be incredible. Now, when we don't know something, as the first suggestion for this point I made, you haven't heard anything from anyone, you haven't seen anything, you're just assuming your ex is living their best life. Well, unfortunately, when we don't know something, there are blanks in the story. And what happens when we have blanks in the story? Our mind fills in the blanks. Our brain fills in the blanks. Well, this is going to be good, surely. Our brain, our mind, it surely works for us. It's on our side. Unfortunately, not. Sometimes our brain can be our worst enemy in this regard, because when it fills in the blanks, it often fills it with a worst case scenario. Now, does this mean it's definitely not true what you're thinking? Sadly not. It doesn't mean it's definitely not true. It could be true, but most of the time it isn't. Most of the time, our brain, our mind presents to us the worst case scenario to fill in the blank, and that is very often not true. So, if you're thinking to yourself, I think my ex is living their best life because I just think they are, well, how about you try and change that faulty thinking to imagining that your ex is living a fairly mundane and boring life. Now, you might say, well, why should I think that? And I would argue back, well, why should you think they're living their best life? If you can think one thing with no evidence, why not think another thing with no evidence? You may as well be kind to yourself, because unless there is supporting evidence, we don't know. You don't know. Your brain, your mind doesn't know. So why are we giving it so much credit for creating a narrative that we have no proof actually exists? It's never going to help you in this way. It's never going to support you, sadly. Instead, it's just going to showcase to you the worst possible scenario, which is not likely to actually be true. Now, the second possibility for point number 2 that I suggest is that you've been told something. Somebody has told you that your ex is living an incredible life, and therefore, that's why you know. But how about if what they told you wasn't quite true? Maybe they're deliberately telling you lies for a vindictive type of reason, which of course I can't predict without knowing your dynamics with your friends, with your work colleagues, with your acquaintances. I don't know. But sadly, sometimes somebody will tell you something because they actually want to hurt you. Now, hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully that's not the situation, but sometimes it is what actually happens. Alternatively, though, sometimes you'll hear something of somebody who doesn't want to hurt you. They're not meaning to hurt you, but they're passing on information which is obviously doing that to you. And why are they doing it? Because they've been told by your ex-dumper. Now, this could be deliberate, it might be accidental, but if you have a mutual friend, a family member, or anybody who knows you and your ex, and they find out information about your ex, they might pass it on to you as a way of trying to help, not realising and recognising it's making you feel worse. Now, what could this be? Well, maybe your ex-dumper has deliberately told you things which are untrue to showcase them as living their best life, and they're simply passing it on. Maybe Your ex-dumper is telling information in one direction about certain things, and this mutual friend has accidentally, through hearing it from them and passing it on to you, and that time and space in between, actually ended up exaggerating things in a way where the story actually sounds more elaborate and wonderful than it really was. Either way, we can see that hearing second-hand information from a third party is not necessarily accurate. Most of the time, I would say it's quite often inaccurate. Unless you're hearing it and seeing it with your own eyes, I'd be very, very skeptical whether what you are told, what you hear, is absolutely the truth. Now, the third part of point number 3 that I was suggesting is maybe you've seen something yourself on social media. Now, again, from what you've just heard me say previously, you can see where I'm going to go with this. Just because you've seen it online, it doesn't mean it's true. Even if you've seen photos or videos that your ex has actually posted themselves, it doesn't mean that there wasn't a level of staging in what you're actually witnessing. Now, maybe they haven't gone as far as that, but definitely they're just presenting to you a few seconds within that 24-hour period of their day. Does it mean they were happy 24/7? No, it doesn't. Maybe that photo that you saw where they're smiling in a real happy way was the only moment they were smiling during that whole event that you saw your ex at, and they decide, okay, I was feeling terrible, I was bored, I was lonely, but this photo of me looks good, I'm going to post that one. Okay, whether it's a photo, whether it's a video, we present on social media what we want other people to see, what we want other people to think, and therefore we have a level of control, just as your ex will with their profile, about what they want the world to feel when they see the content. Social media uploads are not necessarily 100% accurate. Again, most of the time, they're not going to be accurate. At best, they're going to be somebody living their best life in that moment, and they've actually just posted that moment, even though the reality is most of their life they're feeling quite bored and lonely. And at worst, things can actually be staged, where there is no truth to it whatsoever. Again, I'm not saying your ex is going to that elaborate plan, but they may do. And even if they're not, just because you see a few happy photos and videos surrounded by lots of new people, it doesn't mean that your ex knows any of these new people. Maybe for whatever reason, they was involved in a photo or a video where there was background people who seemed to be connected to your ex, but guess what? They actually wasn't. If you don't know the truth, if you wasn't there, if you didn't hear it or see it with your own eyes and ears, I wouldn't necessarily believe it and use it as a way of beating yourself up when you're already feeling very, very sad. Remember, one of the biggest secrets that your ex-dumper doesn't want you to know is perhaps that their life isn't incredible. Now, if you would like advice and support about how to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Go to my website www.dateme.tips for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. So now let's get into point number 3 and my final point of today's podcast about dumpers don't want dumpees to know this. And point number 3 is they might come back. Now this is a big one, because at the time of a breakup, your ex-dumper may have said, I never want to see you again. I never want to speak with you again. I never want to hear from you again. And you might hear these words or read them or whatever the situation was at the breakup and think, oh my gosh, my ex never ever wants to see me again. Now what you need to remember is that this is them speaking in the moment. This is how they feel right now. It wasn't how they felt 6 months ago when you were feeling really loved up and they were telling you how much they loved you. If you can remember back then to when they told you how much they loved you, and if that was true, and then unfortunately from that point, we've now got to the stage where they're saying, I don't want to see you anymore. Well, if that's also true, then what we can see is there has been a change in the evolution of thought. So why can't there be further evolution? Well, there can be. And that's the point of this. Your ex-dumper might come back, irrespective of what they told you at the time of a breakup, irrespective of what they've said to you post-breakup. This is their feelings now. It's not necessarily their feelings in 6 months or a year. Now, does this mean you should be chasing your ex and saying, hey, look, I know you said you didn't want to hear from me yesterday, but maybe you want to hear from me now today? Okay, no, you should not be doing that, okay? I'm not suggesting that you chase your ex. In most instances, if you've been dumped, you should never contact your ex again unless they contact you first. But what I am saying is that in the future, maybe your ex-dumper does reach out to you. Maybe the person who said, I never want to see you again, I never want to talk to you again, maybe they're the person 9 months down the line that sends you a text. And at that point you can reply, and therefore they are hearing from you, even if they told you, I don't want to hear from you again. They've opened the door and you have walked through it in this instance. That's what I mean here. Just because your ex-dumper said something yesterday, it doesn't mean they'll be feeling the same way in a few months' time. Maybe they will. Okay, and it is important to recognise that sadly, there is no 100% guaranteed way to get your ex back. And some of you won't get your ex back. And that is very important for us to realise. But others of you will. Some of you will get your ex back, even if your ex originally said, I never ever want to see you again. Even if your ex said yesterday, look, we broke up 6 months ago, stop texting me, I don't want to ever see you again. Even if that has happened, there is no guarantee that further down the line, they might not change their mind and reach out to you. Now look, if you pester your ex, if you keep chasing them post-breakup, your chances of getting them back is going to diminish. Your chances of them changing their mind is going to lessen. But never say never. You never know. But you must make sure you do the right thing now to increase your chance of success later. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.